welcome to the March for the Arts Voices podcast. I'm Liz Barker and I'm joined by Becky Webb, and together on this podcast we talk to people about their experiences of the arts during the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis of 2020. Today we are joined by Jacob and Alexi, who are both recent graduates from Alra North. When lockdown started in March, they were midway through their first year in the industry since graduating and were working on projects and opportunities that had to be cancelled or delayed due to lockdown. They are both performers, and Jacob is also a poet, and Alexi recently directed a sellout show at the Lowry where he works. They are also both members of Casino Improv.
So, hi guys, welcome. So first off, I just want you to just tell us a bit about yourselves and sort of how you got into the arts and what brought you to Alra. If you want to maybe start, Alexi, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure, great. Hi, I'm Alexi. I got into the arts, you know, as we all do with a play in primary school where I was the big bad wolf. And my head teacher praised me for it, and because I got validation, I was like, I can make a career out of this. I'm 11. I know what I want for my future. And yeah, got into Alra after going to college, at Winstanley College in Wigan. There's very close links between those two schools. Didn't get in the first year, didn't get in the second year, and eventually got into the third year. So I had a little bit of time between graduation and my formal training. Absolutely smashed Alra, crushed it, couldn't have done it better. That's a lie, I got a 2-1. I could empirically have done it better. And yeah, I've been out for a year now, trying to make it work here in the big bad world of the performing arts industry, working at a theatre, doing all the bar jobs, all the waitering gigs, all the stereotypes that you can. And yeah, I recently directed a show. Tell me if I'm talking for too long, by the way. Is this all?
That's all right. We can always cut you out. It's
good,
fine.
That's fair. I love it when we have fun jokes with each other. Yeah, I
also love that you were like, I got out for a year. You made Alra sound like prison, Alexi. It's quite interesting.
I escaped the confines of the educational institution that is Alra North. No, I got a lot of really good training and advice, and what I loved about my Alra training specifically was that they weren't just trying to make us actors, they were trying to actively make us artists and to think about ourselves as creatives in a more multifaceted way, in I think the way that you need to in the industry as it is currently, where you can't just do one thing. You can't just be an actor, you have to also know how to make a show happen. You have to know how to write a show and do a bit of directing and do a bit of like design work. You have to be able to do all these extra little skills, and I think that's something that I really learned at Alra.
Oh, thank you, Alexi. How about you, Jacob? What was your path to?
Yeah, well, how do I follow that? So I was. So I'm Jacob. I'm from Hull originally, and so I mean, similar to the way I was I did a few sort of little acting gigs when I was a child. I was the son of Macduff who was stabbed in the Tour of Macbeth. That was always a classic. Father, he hath killed me was probably my first professional line. So I did that when I was about like 7 or 8. I did the odd sort of like radio play and stuff. So it was always something I was going to pursue as an adult, sort of post sixth form. I was involved in Hull with a sort of like youth performing arts educational school and sort of theatre company that was called Napa, and that was my first sort of experience of theatre and sort of creating art almost like professionally or to a professional standard, and where I sort of learned about drama schools and all the different sort of like things and paths that sort of one has to do in order to sort of like pursue a career in sort of like performing arts. So then I took 2 years out, similar to Alexi, just to sort of have fun, really. Just sort of worked and went on holidays and did all this stuff, and then went to drama school. I also went to Alra North. Had a great time at Alra. Sort of, I agree with everything Alexi said about the sort of like creating artists thing. I had a really good time. I was very fortunate enough to we had a very sort of like close knit group of friends that sort of carried us all through Alra. Got involved with casino improv on the side, and so we had this sort of like community based around our drama school, which I really, really enjoyed. Graduated, and I was extremely lucky. I signed with a great agent, and I had a Christmas job sort of booked before I graduated. So what I was able to do was put off that inevitable a bit. So the sort of like empty abyss that comes with graduating drama school, where you're like, okay, now now I need to go get a job. Because I had a job lined up in Christmas, I was able to sort of be like, yeah, if I don't get a job in October, it's sort of like September, October, it's okay, because I've got a job to come to in the end of October. So that was really nice. And I also I was cast as a small part in the new Russell T Davies drama, Boys, which sort of fit nicely in just before I did Peter Pan at Christmas. So yeah, I entered 2020 with sort of very high hopes. I'd had a very good experience of the latter end of 2019 and the sort of the half of 2019 I was graduated for. I'd done 2 jobs. I was able to sort of make a living. I built up a sort of life in Manchester where I had sort of like a B job. I was doing a lot of medical role plays for the Greater Manchester General Medical Council, and I was starting to get more and more of them. I was starting to get involved with other role play companies. I was going to go for an interview with another company that were based in London to do a lot of corporate acting for them. So I had like building blocks were in place where I was going to be able to, even when sort of like long-term acting jobs weren't available, I was still going to be able to make a regular income from acting only, which was and still is the sort of like, I'm like, that's the sort of like dream, to make a full living off the thing I spent so much money to train in. And then unfortunately, as is the case for all of us, sort of society shut down, and so a lot of that was cancelled, and I haven't worked a day since.
So with that, is that how that has happened for you then? Basically all of that work is cancelled. There's no, like with the London one, is that now just, there's no idea of when that might happen?
Well, so my interview for that one was in March. It was like March the 18th or something, and it meant getting a train, but that was before there'd been any official like lockdown announcement. Everything was just sort of, it felt like rumour, but it was like rumour with a little bit of scientists saying the odd thing on social media, and I was like, and so I was so unsure about whether I could go to this sort of interview, this audition. I emailed, and they were like, it's still going ahead, but we understand if you're not comfortable. And then at the time my flatmate had a sore throat, and I was like, can I go? Like, I did, and now I'm like, sore throat isn't even a symptom, but at the time I was like, I could be killing everyone on the train. Like, there was all this, everything was so dramatic in my head because we knew so little about it that I couldn't in good conscience get on a train and go to this interview. So I sort of emailed and explained that, and they were like, that's fine. And they did assure me that once they were able to do sort of corporate acting gigs again, then they would sort of like be back in contact. So fingers crossed that still happens whenever that may be. But yeah, unfortunately, all the medical roleplay stuff, we're all self-employed contractors. So when the exams stopped being able to happen, we stopped being able to be booked for work. They were nice enough they paid us for ones that we'd already been booked for, which was very good of them. But I remember waking up, rolling over and looking at my phone, and had received an email saying that they'd cancelled all exams for the foreseeable future, and I rolled over to the other side and signed up for Universal Credit.
So So with your agent then, is it, are you still signed? How is that working? Are they just on hiatus or?
Yeah, so again, I've been very, very lucky. They sent an email out at the beginning, just to sort of explain. I was auditioning for a show around March time, and so like I auditioned, and then obviously the show got cancelled. So I didn't know whether I had the part or anything, but I got an email off my agent then, and were like, just letting you know the show's been cancelled, as is a lot of things. Like, it looks like there's not going to be work for a while. Hang in there. And they were really, really nice. They sent us an email out and were like, we want you to know that, like, we understand it's not that you lot aren't getting work, there's just no work. So they all went on, I think a lot of them went on furlough. I don't know the ins and outs of how they worked within the agency, but they continued to represent me. They were able to, I was able to contact them all through lockdown. So stuff with the poem, so like when the poem I wrote made it onto the BBC, they sort of like published it on their social media and stuff. So they were very supportive, even though I wasn't getting them any money because we weren't being paid anything.
Yeah, and Alexi, you work for the Lowry, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So you obviously been working there, and you did the show with them. So they're quite a supportive company, and they've furloughed you. Is that right?
Yeah. So I kind of got the Lowry job pretty much as soon as I graduated, because I knew I wanted to move to Manchester. And around the same time, I was also getting like some like local stuff. Like I was doing a couple of like fringe productions. So I was kind of like, I've been at the Lowry for a while, nearly a year, which is weird. It's weird how we've just had 5 months just ripped out of the schedule, isn't it? That's bizarre. But yeah, I've been really lucky that I kind of got in with the Lowry, and that they're kind of a larger, because they're a charity rather than a business. So there's a lot of like, I don't know how money works with charities, but they have some reserves in which they can support their local artists. But before furlough and all that, we had like, me and a couple of the people that worked there, we all decided to get together and put on a show, which was like completely supported by the Lowry. They gave us the theatre for like a really good rate. They gave us free rehearsal rooms whenever we wanted them, by which we just went into a room in the building, asked someone, was this being used, and then just like put up. So we were in like the classrooms for several rehearsals, or a store cupboard. But it was space that we didn't have to pay for, so that was great.
Otherwise known as standard rehearsal
yeah,
rooms
exactly.
and
Yeah,
spaces.
I think this is just visions of the rest of my career spreading out in front of me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh wow, this is the life. But they were really.
I've rehearsed many a show in a churchyard before when there's been no rehearsal space available.
I really want to do one of those. That sounds cool. But yeah, so the Lowry is super supportive as an organisation, and even before like the official furlough scheme was announced, they had already said that they were going to support everyone that worked there with some kind of like recurring payment. So I've been very fortunate and lucky to be involved with the Lowry, especially at this kind of like graduate time. And like Jacob mentioned earlier, there's this kind of sense of momentum when you come out of drama school, and I think that it's really easy to be stopped, and like there's so many hurdles that could happen where you just like have a couple dry months and you like kind of slow down your momentum. So having like coming out of drama school, doing 2 like fringe productions and then working on my own show, I was kind of like keeping up momentum. Like I was waitering and I was bartending, but at the very least I was working on a show. And so luckily the performance of the show I think was on the 2nd of March, and then not 2 weeks later the entire country was locked down. So
have you been able to keep up that momentum, like with lockdown and stuff? Have you been doing things to keep going? Like how's that felt for you?
For me, I've kind of like taken it as a bit of a hiatus. Like I wasn't feeling particularly motivated during lockdown. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, not that I wasn't, like I managed to keep up. Like I was doing a lot of healthy things for me. I've been doing I've been doing the artist's way. Which has been a delight, and I've literally this morning just finished my first full notebook of morning pages, which was a very like big moment for me. lots of this, lots of enlightened looks going on. But yeah, I've been doing things, but I haven't been able to do things professionally, and I haven't felt that professional momentum continuing because there is no theatre's in a weird place, and what I make and what we make is theatre, and with no framework there to support us and no guarantee that the work that I'm good at making is going to come back in any real way, I've been really stunted and feeling like I've just been left with a lot of questions that I don't have answers for. Like, I want to make and I want to create and I kind of want to do stuff, but I don't know what to make. And that's been a real like stumbling point for me. And again, I've been very lucky. I signed with an agent on my way out of drama school, so I've got a good local agency behind me. But again, like Jacob said, there's just no work to be given. Like now there's some more jobs coming through, but yeah, there's been very little creatively for me to work on throughout lockdown that wasn't just personal projects.
So financially though, then with the furlough, has that been enough for you to live on? And obviously come October with that ending, what's your kind of financial, not to be too personal into it, but is it a concern for you? Is it a worry?
It's definitely a worry, because I again, like, I've been lucky. My furlough actually has been enough for me to get by, and like I live with my landlord. He's a mate of mine, so like he was very nice and like reduced rent for a while there just to help support us and help us get it through. But yeah, so I've been lucky in that my furlough has been enough to live. Like I've been fine, and I think that might have something to do with, you know, not as much creative impetus, because I'm like, there's some kind of barrier there. There's some safety net. But yeah, come to the end of October, I'm like, oh, what do I do? Because I work at a theatre, and if the theatre doesn't open for Christmas, well then, you know.
With no kind of structure to when theatres are going to come back, when we're going to even be able to perform, that is actually very possible to have a really strong impact on you. So, you know, is that something that you've been like, if you feel comfortable talking about it, is that something that is a concern, or that you have been?
I mean, I've
definitely
over the past few months been considering other options outside of acting as a career. Like, I have fully gone through the rigmarole of what are my applicable skills. Is being an office manager a career move that I could live with? You know, like this idea of how can I use my creativity in a way that isn't acting, because acting isn't consistent now, like, has been a real point of thought for me. And this idea of, if it's, I mean, obviously this is an extremely heightened version of the artist's life, of being like, we're uncertain if anything's going to happen again. And just being like, can I live with that comfortably? Is that the life that I want to live? Do I just want a job that, although less creatively fulfilling, gives me stability and safety? That's been a lot of the like back and forth, I think, been bopping around my mind, at least. Because I know that I can't live without it. Like, I need to do this. But is there ways that I can do something else to get money and then just have this as my outside of work thing? Yeah.
Yeah, it is a sort of a very real sort of thing, with how many people are potentially going to have to leave the industry with the way things are.
Yeah.
But Jacob, I know Alexi's been furloughed, and I'm not even going to diminish, obviously, yes, you've been furloughed, but the sort of stress that comes with that is very real, and it's not a case of, oh, you're safe, you've been furloughed. That isn't what this is about. But Jacob, I know, because you are self-employed and a recent graduate, it meant that you weren't entitled to the self-employment income support scheme. So can you talk to us just a little bit about like your situation and what has happened there?
Yeah. So, like I say, I signed up for Universal Credit there was no, I didn't even know what furlough meant at this point. Like I'd never heard it as a word. So all I saw was, oh, where's all my money going to come from? I need to pay rent. So I rolled over, signed up for Universal Credit, and Universal Credit very quickly got back to me with the sort of interview that's sort of like the standard practice interview, and I just explained, I was like, I'm gainfully self-employed, or I was making a living off just self-employed work, but all that work has now stopped. And so they were like, okay, well, we'll give you the support, and like when jobs start coming back, then that's when we'll talk about coming off Universal Credit, which is nice of them. I remember so then people start talking about this self-employed furlough, and then being able to work it out from your sort of like tax return. I'd never done one. My first tax year, self-employed, ended in April, and so this was before April. I was like, oh, I've never done one of these. They're not going to be able to know. So I sort of saw it coming, and I remember when sort of like Rishi Sunak did the big announcement about the self-employed furlough scheme, and that it wouldn't include sort of people like me that have just graduated. And I remember someone asked a question about newly self-employed people, and he was like, we can't help everyone. And so like they kept doing this, like everyone, they kept throwing this it's going to be helping 95% of the people. And I was like, okay, good, I'm the 5%. So I remember I was in like that was probably the lowest point of lockdown for me, just because that was the most uncertain. Like the actual, like the pandemic side of it was always like a constant anxiety, but that was like a time when like I was like, oh my god, like I've got no income. Like how am I going to pay for anything here? So but then I had no other choice. I sort of at that time had to live with that. I had Universal Credit, which was covering my rent. I was very lucky that I went back to Hull, and sort of like I had friends and family that would sometimes chip in and get food for like the house, and like not expect me to pay, which is very extremely kind of them for the first month when it was particularly hard. So I was very, very lucky. And then it was just a case of, right, there's going to be no sort of government support. What grants are out there? What can I sort of do to financially help myself? So like I applied, there was the Arts Council application. I applied for that. I was unsuccessful. I kind of expected to be unsuccessful. And that's for reasons, like I can't remember why at the minute, but I remember seeing a few of the questions and I was like, I don't think I'm not as vulnerable as I imagine the people that you are wanting to help here are. But what I was lucky enough to receive was the Netflix grant, where they were giving for theatre workers, where they gave £1,000 to like successful applicants that had worked 8 weeks of theatre or more in 2019. So luckily I'd done that, applied, and was successful. So that sort of grant has been able to tide me over for this last month at least. And like work's slowly getting up again now as far as the General Medical Council go. So I should be able to get an income going, but there's been like it's been a case of Universal Credit and sort of like survive off that. There's been no,
has that been a feasible thing to survive off Universal Credit? Is that possible?
It has been for me, but I'm very aware that I'm a 24-year-old who rents I rented a shared house, and now I rent a shared flat. I don't have any children to support. I don't have bills I don't have massive bills to pay that aren't like electricity, water. Like I don't have a car. I don't have like other sort of like things I need to pay for so when it came to this, and I knew that I was having to survive off Universal Credit, I knew it was going to have to be a case of right, drop paying for that, live off the bare minimum. And so it's been possible because like there wasn't a lot of places to spend money in like April and May, was there? It was like nothing was open, so I was able to save and sort of like get through it that way, really. So it was okay for me, but it was just okay for me, and I was probably in the best situation to survive that. So I can't imagine what it's like for people who do have like kids to look after, or there's two of them trying to keep a mortgage going. Like there's a lot of variables.
So quite interesting how we,
situation not had.
as a thing, when you're like, you're so very lucky that you had family to buy food for you, and it's like, this is where we're at. It's that we have to be so grateful when people can buy our food for us, and it's like that's not the way this should be. You know, it should be like our privilege shouldn't be someone can buy food for us. Our privilege should be I can cover my bills, I can pay my rent, I can live a life where I'm not anxious and scared about how I'm going to sort of pay for stuff. It's quite interesting how that is now the shift. I'm not denying privilege, I'm just saying what we consider to be like grateful for is survival, and it's like that's not the way we all should be. But with that then, with your experiences, is there anything that you would want to say to the government that you want people to know about or be aware of the situation, where I think a lot of people might be thinking, well, it's just theatres, they've just closed and they're not doing anything, or you know, they'll be fine next year. Is there anything where you're like, actually no, this is what is happening, or I would like to know what you were going to do, or things that you want to know, things that you're thinking or feeling? Alexi?
I think I want people to know that theatre is a very delicate ecosystem that works off a lot of goodwill and people doing things because they love it. And we can only do that because we eke the bare minimum out of the systems that we created. And when we don't have those systems because they're not supported by the government and they're not able to be supported by patrons and just the people that live and breathe this stuff, because we don't have day jobs anymore, it's not going to work. And I don't think that people quite appreciate the amount of time and love and dedication and sacrifice that goes into making the things that they enjoy and care about. So I want people to know that it's precarious, and I want people to know that this is a time in which we need to prioritize culture and support and general love and looking after people rather than caring about other stuff. God, I was so close. I was so close to having a nice button on that point. Oh well.
Consumerism is maybe what you were going for. I think maybe there. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not going to put words in.
No, do, because I didn't have any.
Yeah, but it was very beautiful. So thank you. What about you, Jacob?
Yeah, I think I'd sort of beg. Beg, that's a choice of word. The sort of government to recognise that theatre sort of like lives beyond this top tier, especially. So I know like a lot of the sort of more public, like you see pictures of Oliver Dowden stood in the Globe looking all like melancholy, and so like, and while yes, okay, so this, like with this top tier of theatre, like the jewel in England's crown or whatever, like we like love them, support them, they're a great resource, yes, but there's like, then we go to, there's like regional theatres that are going to need help too, because like the Royal Exchange has made 60% of its staff redundant. 60% of one of the sort of like the most incredible regional theatres in the country have been made redundant because of a lack of government support and funding. Even further down, than that, sort of like smaller arts venues. We've got sort of like performing arts groups outside of schools that not only are so important for sort of training a next generation of performers and creatives and event staff, and they're so extremely important for a lot of young people's mental health. I don't think it can be understated how most, if not all, creatives I've spoken to have expressed struggles with mental health as far as like their experiences of school, of like sort of generic education, of life, and almost every time you hear the same thing. Oh, but I had this class I did on a Thursday night, or I had this group I'd go to after school, or I did this Saturday morning thing, and that was their saving grace, and that was so exceptionally important. And without that, I feel like we're going to lose a lot more than jobs.
I think you're totally right. I know Liz has the same experience as well of growing up of drama schools and stuff, and understanding that these are the organisations that don't have venues, as it were, so they're not sort of eligible for a lot of the grants and schemes, but they are vital to the nurturing, and even for people that aren't going to go into the arts. These groups create rounded people and are valuable to create wonderful humans, and they're so vital, but because they're seen as soft subjects, it's sort of like dismissed. But yeah, you're right, they are so incredibly vital, both to the ecosystem of theatre, but also I think to the ecosystem of life. Yeah, I went there.
Yeah,
I went there.
I love it. Let's talk about ecosystems more.
That's where I went.
I wrote a blog post for our website last night, and I used the analogy that the live arts and live entertainment industry is a very delicate house of cards, and if you don't save all the cards, you do not save the house. And I really, it was like nearly midnight, and I was typing this blog, and I was like, I've gone too far here. This is too much.
Perfect.
Yeah, but then I read it, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. But that's where we are. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. We appreciate you obviously coming in and talking about it, especially as well. Not everything is going to be easy to talk about because it's quite a difficult time. So we appreciate you sharing that with us. Is there anything else? I know you did your poem in lockdown. Can someone access that anywhere, Jacob? Where can people find that?
Yeah, so it's on my Twitter, Jacob96 Butler, and it was also on YouTube. It's called Poem 19 by Jacob Butler. It was just a poem I wrote about my experience at the beginning of lockdown, about what I was sort of observing about the people around me and how we were all sort of coping and living through lockdown. I wrote that, and I sort of partnered up with a incredible musician that I know from Hull called Andrew Siddle, who wrote an original piece of music to underscore it. And then we made a film. Like, it was a really sort of nice creative experience for me, and something that sort of kept me going for sort of the early parts of lockdown. So yeah, that's on YouTube. I do believe it's also still on BBC iPlayer as part of the BBC Upload Festival. It was on the Sunday in the Writers' Tent show. It's on there as well.
Lovely, thank you. And Alexi, I think, are you working on a new podcast with someone? Is that what is happening with you? Or
I don't know. I mean, like, that was there's something that's gonna happen somewhere down the line, but I've got nothing to talk about. But if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Alexi was here. You can see the tweets that I like, because I never tweet or retweet, or you can see me occasionally upload something to do with D&D on my Instagram story. And that's it. That's all the content that I produce these days.
That's all right. That's okay. It's not about having to produce content. It's about being you and doing what you need to do. So D&D fans, for example, then can follow Liz as a DM as well.
Yeah.
Follow you on Instagram.
Thank you for listening to the March for the Arts Voices podcast. The Voices Project is an open platform for anyone who is involved in any way with the arts to share their thoughts, feelings and experiences of art in the current crisis. If you would like to participate and share your voice, you can find out how to do that by visiting our website www.marchforthearts.com. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to give us a review, subscribe or share.